I was born here at Calvary Hospital, the best hospital in Hobart, and grew up here and lived here until I was about 21 when I first moved away to do some study, and lived all over the city. First off in the Eastern Shore over in Lindisfarne, and then the Glebe and South Hobart, Sandy Bay, and so around the city a lot. And I don't know, I mean, it's, as we all know, it's a beautiful, lovely city to live in, especially to grow up in, I think, as a kid. I moved away to study playwriting, and although I'd moved away to do that, I'd started to do things down here, and in fact my first ever play was in the backspace where this show is. And it's always been important because Tassie kind of gave me this career, is how I feel. In fact, you did in many ways. It's always been important for me to be coming back and trying to do work back here, to be giving back to the place, and also just to be staying in touch and keeping the relationships going.
Did you do anything else apart from writing, like music? Or?
I did a lot of sport. I started through school and stuff, and I love team sport. I started, actually, when I first left school, I did a year at the Conservatorium studying composition. But one of the wonderful tutors there, Mihal McCartney, kept telling me I was trying to tell stories through my music, and so I learnt the lesson pretty quickly, and also failing helps you learn the lesson pretty quickly, failing subjects, and so I gave up and went and did an arts degree straight after that.
So writing language words, where does that start? An inspirational teacher, an event?
I had an amazing drama teacher at high school. His name was Bill Jarmstone, and he was from the States, and he was insane. He was a brilliant drama teacher if you were into drama. He didn't really care about you if you weren't. So he shared his passion well, but he probably wasn't. And he was probably never should have really been a teacher, but I'm very glad he was. And we did crazy things. So normally when you do drama at high school, you might do David Williamson or a version or a production of Away or something like that. We were doing Sam Shepard plays and Bertolt Brecht and learning about Feldenkrais and the Alexander technique. It was totally crazy. And this was an all-boys school doing kind of movement Feldenkrais stuff on a Wednesday morning before going to maths. It was insane. But that got in my blood then. And Sam Shepard was the real one. He just seemed like such a rock star, such a cool guy. And I wanted to be cool. And in my weird, nerdy world, being cool was trying to be like a playwright.
How did the first play out of your hands come along?
I wrote a very terrible little film script at school that was full of teenage angst and introspection. I'm sure it was one of the best things you would have ever seen. And then I was interested in writing, and I did a lot of creative writing through school and uni and stuff, although I almost failed creative writing at uni, which I thought was funny now. And so just wrote it for myself, really. And then, I don't know why on earth I gave it to a mate to read, but I did.
So what age were you then? Primary or high school?
No. When this first play was on, I was probably 19, so just out of school.
Yeah. And how did it go?
Well, I mean, I don't know, and this is a big thing for this show. At that stage, as I was entering amateur theatre, I mean, Robert Jarman is he's one of the leading lights of theatre down here. Incredibly talented, incredibly dedicated, incredibly intelligent, and very, very supportive. And so I'd had this first play on, and Robert Jarman came to see it one night, which we were all incredibly excited about. And then he came and introduced himself to me afterwards and said to me, Tom, you must write me a play one day, which knocked my socks off that Robert Jarman would ask me to do that. And it's taken me about 15 years, but I have. Yeah.
So what else happened career-wise from that first play to leading Tasmania?
Well, you, actually. There was a few artists, young artists doing things, and we're all friends, actors and things, and then I suddenly got a call out of the blue from you, I think, and someone had told you to call me, saying that there was this Young Artists Initiative grant that you could apply for to get mentoring or to further your skills. and you helped us all write the applications because we didn't know what we were doing. And getting that grant led me to being mentored by a playwright called Timothy Daly, who then was a resident writer at the National Playwrights Centre. And that was it, really. The 6 months or so initially that I spent with him, he said, you should come to Sydney and work more closely with me. So I did that, and I applied to a course at NIDA and got into that, but that was only one night a week for 6 months or something. There's now a brilliant writing course run at NIDA that was run by Jane Bodie and is now run by Stephen Sewell, which is really a fantastic course. Our course was a very little course, but it was the thing that I kind of needed to be getting out and pushing myself further and challenging myself more. So that was what got me out of Tassie and got me to really start taking playwriting a bit more seriously. But even then, through my early 20s, I was calling myself a playwright, but using that as an excuse to, drink more, really. Yeah. Through the next few years, I only wrote short plays, 15, 20 minutes. And looking back on it, you actually learn a lot doing that. So I was writing short plays, and I was still desperately trying to mimic my heroes. To the point where I'd probably be accused of plagiarism these days. But you learn through doing that, actually, because you're reading the words that you love and really are moved by, and then you want to see how they do it. So you explore it on the page to see how someone else did it, and that's how you then start to find your own voice. And like, okay, well, I've done that, and what about that is more me, and slowly these things become more yourself. And you learn all you really need to know through trying to write a long play, to write a short play, because to write a good short play is very difficult. To make it not actually something that is really should just be a scene of a longer work, but to write a 10-minute play that has a beginning, middle, and end is difficult. And I didn't achieve that quite often, but I tried. And so there I had a short play like that in Sydney. It's part of a little competition, which was exciting, my first play on the mainland. Well, I do remember, and I can't believe sometimes you should think before you start telling stories. I remember when I was first going to go to Sydney and I was lying in my bed in Hobart thinking, wow, I'm going to go to Sydney and study at NIDA. I'm sure that the first play I'll have on, I'll make about $1 million from it, and then I'll be able to, pay my family back for everything they've done for me and stuff. Yeah, sure, yeah. So I had a short play on, which probably cost me about $2,000, and then moved to Melbourne, had another little play on, a couple of little plays on in La Mama, but then went to this thing called Interplay, which tragically isn't around anymore. It's an international young playwriting festival. So young playwrights from all over the world got together in Townsville, of all places, and shared work and learnt. And tutors came from different parts of the world as well. And the one I went to had a few staff member from the Royal Court in London, which is, the mecca of new writing in the English language for the last 50 or 60 years. And they run young writers programs. And Simon Stevens, the man that was there, said if I could get to London, I could do the writing program. And that, just like the move, what you did for me, going from Tassie to Australia, going from there to overseas, of course, made a massive difference. Just broadening, the things you experience and the writing you experience, but the life as well. It just changes your approach to everything. When I was at the Royal Court, that was just a one night a week thing, but I was a little Hobart boy in London, so I was small and naive and wide-eyed, and Simon became a friend, which was really lovely. I mean, very exciting to have a lovely man teaching you, and who's a very talented, famous playwright too. And he said to me one day when I got in a bit early for the course, just said something like, because we had to write a play for that course at the end, and he said, there's no point writing about something unless it is deeply important to you. And I'd always, the Port Arthur massacre had a massive impact on my life. I always remembered the day incredibly clearly, as I'm sure everyone here does that was in Tasmania, in Hobart that day. And something about being on the other side of the world made it possible, made the idea of approaching that subject matter possible, where I don't think I ever would have felt that if I had stayed here, because it's just so big. And I wrote the first which was actually just a 20-minute kind of thing version of it there. And that play changed everything for me. What I learned through the writing of it, what I learned through doing the interviews with survivors and the people that helped survivors, and then the community down here, the response to the production. It changed absolutely everything in my writing and a lot about who I am, I think. And I learned a huge amount about it. So that I really see that as the start of me being a playwright, really. That's when I started to take it seriously. And so I was always interested in the musicality of language. And Sarah Kane does crazy wild things on the page, and so does Carol Churchill. So reading those at a young age made me, you read their works and you think, wow, how is this a play? It's just one of her plays, 448 Psychosis, is just words seemingly randomly placed on a page for about 20 pages. And so there's no characters, there's no stage directions. Carol Churchill's play, Far Away, the first scene is an amazing, one of the best scenes in theatre ever written, I think, about a daughter and an auntie, and the daughter's woken up in the middle of the night and is staying with her auntie and said, oh, I woke up in the middle of the night. I said, oh, that's all right, that happens sometimes. Yeah, I heard some noise at the back. Oh, that just would have been your dad. And through the scene, you discover that the family has been helping, asylum seekers sneak into England in the back of a truck, but probably also they're probably not. They're probably people smugglers, actually, because it turns quite bad. But it's all simple language, and yet the themes just become huge. So that's the first scene. In the last scene of the play, this is a 45-minute play, there's a scene where basically everything in the world is fighting everything else in the world. So they're talking about which side the crocodiles are on, and the Balkan dentists, and the beavers, and talking about the political machinations of all these things. And so in 45 minutes she goes from this very real, very now world to this insane world. There's a stage direction in that play which is we see a parade of prisoners. 10 is too few, 20 question mark, 100 question mark, which is one of my favourite stage directions ever too. And so I was getting exposed to writers that really pushed the form of theatre. And so that was influencing my theatre. But the main thing that I think is maybe a bit different, I don't know, they might say this about their writing too, but I was really interested in how we can sit in a piece of music, especially instrumental music and orchestra, and be absolutely engaged in everything going on when there's nothing logically going on. There's nothing for us to understand cognitively. And what is that about music that does that to us? What is it about those rhythms and those timbres and that those structures which get us deeply? And I wondered if theatre often misses an opportunity to get to people's guts like music can by not thinking about how words can be used like that, because words have the meaning behind the words, and then they have the impact of the sound of the words, and that really started to interest me. That sounds really nerdy, and I'm sorry about that, but I really got interested in what impact just listening to words, listening to sounds had, and that led to me. I mean, there's things like Beyond the Neck and Red Sky Morning. They're written quite chorally, like a choir. Beyond the Neck is called a quartet on loss and violence, I think.
Yep.
I should know that. And in that one, I mean, this is very basic stuff, but I was thinking, when you see a quartet, the lead violinist will hold the tube for a while, and that will be backed up by the viola, and then it will swap to the cello, and we'll be following that. And then there'll be a counterpoint as well, where one instrument will kind of seem to work against the line of another one. And that really influenced me with Beyond the Neck, with who's got who are we listening to, how is that being backed up by the other characters or voices, and when do those other voices actually work as a counterpoint or a stoppage to that stuff. So, I mean, that's a really basic thing. More it was this fascination with the experience of words as opposed to the understanding of words.
So after Beyond the Neck, which was a beautiful piece, and it went on to be a radio play and then produced again, I think, at Belvoir downstairs.
Yeah, and Red Stitch in Melbourne, and it's had a production in Perth as well.
Yep. Yeah. So then what came after that?
Well, I'd been writing a lot of other things for myself during that time. The main thing I learned from Beyond the Neck was seeing how the community embraced it down here. I kind of learned that theatre doesn't always need to be, but can be a safe place to deal with difficult subject matters, because we're a community sitting together, sharing these things that can seem too difficult to deal with when you're alone. And so I guess I got interested in that, and that led to kind of research in other full-on tragic, depressing things such as depression and suicide and all these kind of things, and form as well, because the form of Beyond the Neck, if you remember, was it's kind of broken monologues and quite choral-like, and so I wanted to push a lot of that more, and that led to writing a play called Red Sky Morning, which also came down here, actually.
And can I see who saw Red Sky Morning? Please, it's the same club. It's beautiful, yeah?
Yeah, and that was a very special, and that was the first time I got to work with Sam Strong, which was a really beautiful working relationship, and Red Stitch, which is an amazing company full of incredible actors. And when you get to spend 2 years going back every few months to have workshops with the same actors and this great director dramaturg, you've got a responsibility to try to write something really good. So I tried to do that.
So the first overseas opportunity was?
The first play that went on overseas was a short 10-minute play that I acted in with Jonathan Ofterhider, famous filmmaker, at the Edinburgh Fringe, but that doesn't really count. The first kind of big, professional show was a play called Fatherland at a theatre called The Gate in London, which is London has a lot of these theatres that were traditionally built above pubs, and a lot of them are still above pubs, so they're very small spaces, but they've got great reputations. There's The Gate, The Bush, Soho's not quite so much like that. Theatre 503 is similar, but it's a bit of a step down. It's kind of indie level, really high quality indie stuff. And so I'd worked I got to meet a director over there, a wonderful woman called Caroline Steinbeiss, who I've also become friends with. And we put on this play, but we had 2 months. I'd written this first draft of something, which was about a full-on subject matter, surprise, surprise. And the Gate had said to her, look, we want to give you a slot. And they had read a few other things of mine, and they said, yeah, we want to work with both of you. But the big funding cuts were about to come in England, and they were worried that they were going to lose a lot of money. And they said, we really want to give you a production, but it has to be able to go on in January. And they said this to us in October, and I was in Australia. And this play, which was about interfamilial child sexual abuse, really tough subject matter. I was really scared about it. I'd written it a few years before after doing some research, and it was one of those works that I kept pulling out, looking at, going, yeah, there's something in here. No, and putting it back in the drawer. And handed it over to Caroline with a bunch of other stuff. But of course, that was the one that they picked, that they wanted to go on. So I then had 3 months to get it ready, to have my first ever play on in London. And that was scary. I was wearing brown underpants. Yeah.
How did it go?
It went. Look, it had successes and failures, pros and cons. There was something that we got really close to capturing something really important. I feel like when you take on these kind of subject matters, you have a massive responsibility to get it right, because this is real people's lives. And the worst side of real people's lives. And if you're doing that just to make some money, then that's not good. And so you've got to make sure you're really capturing something. And we got really close to that, but I also feel like I didn't, and it was because of the timeline, but I didn't quite do what I feel like I should have done because of that. It got some really great reviews. It went to Germany for a festival there because Caroline's half German. So that was all great. But the stuff that really counts is what you're being able to articulate on stage and what you're sharing. And I just didn't quite get where I would have liked to get with that play.
So mostly, so far,
Yeah.
you tend to write about things that really matter and you completely commit yourself to them. How important is research in getting across a topic that one
Yeah.
hopes isn't familiar to you?
Completely important. Because I don't know I've lived an incredibly fortunate life, so I don't know about depression or suicidal ideation or abuse. I don't know about any of these things personally. I haven't walked in those shoes. So I try to meet people, and it is amazing how generous people are with stories which are incredibly personal and close to them. And so, often I'll start this research by, and you read a lot and watch a lot as well, but meeting people is the big thing. And I'll start by trying to meet, if it's about subject matters like that, I'll try to meet a psychologist first that specialises in it, so I can learn from someone that's distanced from it a bit. And then if that goes well and they feel comfortable with me, then often they will talk to some of their clients to see if they would be willing to talk to me. And again, amazingly, they often do want to. And those moments when you're talking to someone who has lived this stuff, it's humbling. It's really humbling, and obviously often very, very sad, but also, kind of inspiring, because these people have been through things that I could never imagine and survived. And I don't say recovered, because these things change you permanently, but they've survived. They've managed to find a life to keep going, and to tell some silly little guy from Hobart this personal story is an incredibly generous thing to do. And what I learned from that is, of course, there's specifics that I learned from that, but it's the stuff that's beyond words. It's the seeing, it's the hearing these people tell their own stories and seeing what that has done to them. That kind of empathy that's beyond language, that is most important to me, because that's what theatre is. Theatre is experience, more than anything else. It is a great place to explore ideas, and this work is As We Forgive is a work which explores ideas, but theatre always needs to be an experience and an emotional experience, and that's the most important thing about these subject matters too. If we can spend a few minutes, an hour or so, experiencing a tiny amount of what these people live throughout their whole lives, then maybe we can help. We can, as a society, maybe we can be more understanding of what they've been through.
How do you manage the whole thing of what do you take, what do you keep, how far can you take it? How do you feel when they're in the house? Have you had people that weren't happy with the way it's transpired? That's complex.
No, I've very fortunately, people have all been quite happy. There have been a few times when, which I feel quite bad about, where I've lost contact with people, because some people don't want to know about the play and don't want to see it. But some people really do, so I send through drafts in case they ever want to read it. And I feel bad because contact details got lost, or they changed theirs or something. And I feel like part of the responsibility when they've told me that story is to stay in touch about it all, so they know where it's going in the world. But it's Beyond the Neck was a big one for that, because of the opening night down here, there was a number of survivors in the room. And I was scared.
I was talking to someone the other day who was in the house for Beyond the Neck, and she was new to Tasmania, and she said the show finished and everyone, there was that incredible pause, then people clapped for a long time, and then she stood up to leave, and she said everybody else just sat like they were in church, because it was a completely different experience for us who lived here and so many who were connected. She said she just didn't know what she'd walked into, but she knew it was special.
And that didn't just happen there. I had when it was on in Melbourne, I was there one night, and at the end of the show this couple came up to me, and because they'd heard me talking to someone else and worked out that I was the writer, and they had been survivors that day too. The wife had been shot and almost lost her life, and the husband had to keep her alive for nearly 2 hours until authorities could get down there.
Oh yeah, huge. So when you're gathering those stories, I know you've normally got somewhere very close to your person, a little leather book or
it's over there with my girlfriend.
It's usually small, and it's even got smaller writing. I've never seen smaller writing. Is that always with you? Is that how you capture your stories?
Yeah, that's always with me almost all the time, really, because you never know when something's going to come to you. But I also, if there's anyone out there that keeps notebooks, we all get very anal about them. But the way I'm anal about it is by trying to be as I'm anally not anal about it. So I rip pages out, I put shopping lists in there, I do whatever. I want to treat it rough, because I feel like if I treat it with too much awe, then I'll get scared about what I put in there and think that only very special stuff has to go in there, and you can't do that.
Have you ever lost one?
Once. And I often still wonder where it is in the world.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, career highlight so far? There's been a few. He's won more awards than you can poke a stick at.
Well, my girlfriend often asks me these kind of really impossible questions to answer. There's two types of highlights, really. The highlight that's most important to me is the stuff like Beyond the Neck. It's those moments when you see that you've written something that has really affected people, and that's very moving, and that's actually the most important thing by far to me. I've won awards which have been very wonderful. The Victorian Premier's Award gave me $15,000. Yay! That was great, and you know, the acknowledgement of that is really exciting, and the awards that I've won through the Writers Guild, when it's the other writers that give it to you, is really lovely. Yeah.
So, as we forgive, we might move to that one.
Yes.
Have a breather. There's a glass of water too,
Yes,
right?
thank you.
As we forgive, as Tom said many years ago, Robert asked or suggested he might write a play, and I can't remember, about 2 years ago, I think Robert said to me, Tom said he'll write a play, and I went, okay, we'll find the money. So Tasmania Performs, we got Tom to write the work, which will open tonight. Julian Merrick, who's a long-term dramaturg of your work, and
another mentor,
to come and direct it, and Raphael, who taught you at the Conservatorium to do the composition. So it's a beautiful team, plus the photographer from Wynyard, Lisa Garland's beautiful images. So anyway, those artists are all gathering together to make a work. And do you want to tell us a bit about the writing process as we forgive, how you approach that?
Julian is an amazing man. He dramaturged it as well as has directed it. He was kind of associate director, second in charge at Melbourne Theatre Company for about 10 years or so. He's got a lot of experience, and he's an incredibly smart man and very lovely man. But he's an academic as well, and you know, you kind of understand every second or third word, but you feel a bit smarter just because you understand those. But he's an incredible, like if he's going to do something, he doesn't do it half-hearted. And so the dramaturgical process with him was incredibly detailed. And when you're a writer, when you're a young and emerging writer, there's lots of opportunities to work with dramaturgs and mentors, and you can get a lot of feedback. And then you get to a level where companies just kind of wait for the next draft of the play. And I need feedback. I need to be kicked in the bum, and I just need to be getting other people's thoughts on things. And so I know I can see a few of my works which have suffered from that, and that's not, I mean, you know, that in many ways that's my fault, because I should work harder and better without needing other people's prompting. But finally, getting to work with Julian again, you know, I handed him the first draft and got it back, and there was red pen all over it and notes all over the page, and that was wonderful. That was really exciting to be pushed like that, and to be someone that's engaging with your words in such an intense way. And he's it started with Robert. As I said, I was living overseas and just sent him an email saying, how about we do it? And we started to talk about the subject matter and what we wanted to write about. And, you know, I guess me being there, I wanted it to be about something that seems important to me at that stage. And then when Julian came on, he has this level of interrogation of ideas that is incredibly complex and detailed, and which works very well when dealing with this kind of subject matter. And so he sent me off reading, so it's kind of the work, I mean, as you can probably guess from the title, As We Forgive, is an exploration of the idea of forgiveness in different facets. And so he got me reading philosophers with books that are this thick, which I told him I read. And we would have massive discussions. He lived up the road, so I'd go around for a cup of tea, and we'd have these big discussions, and I'd understand about 6 of the words. The great thing was, once he got involved, he and Robert clicked really quickly, and for Robert to get someone with Julian's experience and Julian's talent and intelligence really gave Robert this chance to step up and be challenged in a way that he doesn't often get to do, because he's the person others turn to get that. And so seeing him really jump at that, and those two really get stuck into the ideas, was really fantastic. We've written it. We specifically wanted quite a long time to write it, because you want to have intense periods of working on ideas and then just let them percolate over in the back of your head, which is over here apparently, and then go back to them. And so we wanted this long period. So we've had these 2 years or so with a few workshops in between, and me working with Julian at different times. And I think it's worked. It's certainly been a very enjoyable project to work on. I was about to say I think it's worked very well, but that's not for me to say about the final product. Having said that though, I don't know what Julian has done, but I'm sure many of you here have seen Robert Jarman perform a lot. Not like this.
Dreams of the future, things you haven't achieved yet. What do you want to do next? Because you've done an awful lot very quickly. I'm a very, very lucky man. I'm in the depths of the busiest time I've ever had at the moment. This opens tonight. On Monday, I go to Sydney because rehearsals start there for a show at Belvoir Theatre, which is about the child migration scheme. And also on Monday in Melbourne, the comedy goes into rehearsals. They open on the same night in April. 2 days after they open, I'll probably jump on a plane to go to London, because I'm doing an attachment at the National Theatre, where I'll get to spend 6 weeks at the National, sitting at a desk writing, getting to have all their resources there to create something. And that's not necessarily, they might not pick that up, but it's a chance to write. It's where Warhorse came from. That was a puppetry company that was given this opportunity. I come back, I then go on a lovely holiday with my girlfriend. I come back from that, and about 2 days later I start rehearsals for Stormboy, which is going on at Sydney Theatre Company in Bark and Gecko in Perth, one of my favourite books growing up. And I feel like if I because that book is so close to so many Australians' hearts, if I get it right, I'm set. If I get it wrong, I'm going to need to use my British passport. And on top of all those, I've got this new job. I wrote a libretto for an opera a few years ago, for a chamber opera, a small opera, which is a world I absolutely fell into. I did not seek that out at all. But the composer, who's a very lovely man, a Czech composer, has just got a new commission from a company called the Bavaria State Opera to write. They give out one new commission every 3 to 4 years for their main house, which is a 3,000-seat opera house. It's where Wagner's Ring Cycle premiered. Mozart had premieres there, Strauss, anyone has had shows there. And we're writing an opera about Scott and Amundsen and the race for the South Pole for that opera house, for that stage. And you say, what do I dream for next? I mean, if this is what I'm getting to live, I don't want to dream, because this is beyond what I could have ever dreamt. Yeah. But thank you, that's a beautiful place to end. Thank you for coming out on this lovely Sunday, and thanks to Tom.
Thank you.